So tonight is actually going to be kind of a little bit of a continuation from this morning. We're moving through evangelism, but what I wanted to talk about tonight was living a life that attracts others to Christ. We talked about it a little bit last week, but wanted to kind of flesh it out a little bit more tonight. And so we're going to be in two places, Matthew chapter 5. So turn there. And we'll also be in 1 Peter chapter 2. So go ahead and turn there and stick your finger there. We'll turn back and forth between the two. And what the main point for tonight is effective evangelism is not just about sharing the gospel with words, but also demonstrating it with our lives. You've heard, but my point is, I don't want you to hear me say it's just actions or it's just word, because like the two go hand in hand, right? You can't divorce the two from each other. You might have heard the expression, preach the gospel always, and if necessary, use words. Have you ever heard that? Well, first of all, I think they attribute it to who? Is it Chrysostom? I can't remember who they attribute it to, but the fact is, the person they attribute it to didn't actually say it. And two, it's wrong. Why is it wrong? Right. You have to share at some point. You have to use words, right? So, but the point is, preach the gospel always, and if necessary, use words. What's the point of what he's trying to say?
Live a life consistent with the gospel.
Yeah, right. Your actions can't not reflect the words that you're sharing, right? But my issue with that statement is that you also have to use words. You can't just preach the gospel through your actions, because what's the problem with that? Why can't you just preach the gospel with your actions? What are they coming to faith to? Right. Yeah, and how do they know what the gospel is? What are they responding to? How do they understand, that Jesus is Lord, just based on your actions? Yeah. There are some good people in this world. Now, I know, don't take that the wrong way. I know there's no one who is good, no, not even one, right? But there are some people who live moral lives. Now, when the Bible says there's no one good, they're not good enough to enter heaven, right? The heart is corrupt. But there are some people who live quote unquote good lives, right? But so they're not preaching the gospel though, right? On the flip side of that, there are some Christians who live very not upright and moral lives. And what gospel are they preaching? Well, no gospel. They're not living it. They're not preaching it with their actions. So our actions, our attitudes, and our choices can either attract others to Christ or they can push them away. And so today I want to talk about how Jesus' teachings and Peter's teachings on living honorably among unbelievers work hand in hand with the gospel message that we share with our words. And so together, these passages are going to help us understand how to live in a way that visibly reflects God's character and His love. So let's look at Matthew chapter 5, verse 13. It says, "You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt should lose its taste, how can it be made salty? It's no longer good for anything but to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet." All right, so we talked a little bit about this last week, but what were some of the uses of salt in the ancient world? Okay, preserving, right? Like I mentioned it this morning, it slows decay, right? So they would use it to preserve, meat and food. Yeah, exactly, right. But it also adds flavor. It's a flavor enhancer, right? A meal without salt is bland. Yeah, right. Yeah, right. All right, so if we're to be the salt of the earth, we as Christians should seek to preserve, to slow the decay. Like I mentioned this morning, for us to not be engaged in the world around us, doesn't slow the decay, it only quickens it, right? Because if we're not being salt, if we're not involved and engaged in, in the community and politics and, in the political arena at least, then that decay is only going to be faster, because we are to preserve. We're the salt of the earth. It was used for preserving food, keep it from spoiling. So we're called to preserve and uphold God's standards in the world, helping to protect against morality and spiritual decay. That's why we should be involved. We as Christians can't just sit back and let things just kind of happen. But the second thing is that salt adds flavor, right? Salt enhances the flavor of the food. So Christians, through our actions and our character, should be the flavor of Christ's love and hope and joy to the world around us. And so when our lives reflect these qualities, it'll be attractive to others who are seeking meaning and purpose. But then he also talks about losing the saltiness. If salt loses its saltiness, what is it good for? Nothing. If you've got salt, now obviously, salt, I don't know if salt can lose its saltiness, but Catherine, you're the salt expert. You what? Oh, okay. Well, there you go. Okay. Well, yeah, there you go. Right. So, and that which would also speak to our role in the world, right? Just to be a cleansing effect, I guess, so to speak, of, trying to cleanse out the immorality, I keep trying to say immortality, immorality and evil in the world. We try to flush it out. But regardless, so he's just making a say. He's saying if salt loses its saltiness, then it's not good for anything. It doesn't preserve. It doesn't have any flavor. It doesn't cleanse. It doesn't do anything. So it's just all it is good. All it's good for is to be thrown out and trampled on. They throw it out on the path to provide traction for the carts. Basically, that's what it's good for. So this serves as a warning for us as believers to not compromise with the world or dilute our faith, because if our lives become indistinguishable from non-believers, then we lose our effectiveness as witnesses. If we're the salt of the earth, but we lose our saltiness, then what difference is there between us and a non-believer? Well, obviously we'd still have our salvation, but we're not fulfilling our purpose, right? So we can still have salvation, like we've been talking about, because our salvation is not based on works, but we're not fulfilling the purpose for which God has called us. Yeah, right. Because it's the same. Yeah, you are the light of the world. A city on a hill can't be hidden. No one lights a light or a candle and puts a basket over it, but instead he puts it on a stand so that light can be seen for all. Right? Because we're the light of the world. And the salt of the earth. So, in what ways can Christians act as a preserving influence in today's culture? How do we do that?
Well, playing off of that, salt not only does those things you were mentioning, but if you eat salt, you get thirsty.
Huh.
And so, if
Yeah.
if you're doing your job, you're creating thirst for this.
Right. That's a great point. Yeah.
Once you get people in this, like we are tonight, you get further and further from.
Right. You start to desire that more. Right. You become hungry, thirsty for God.
And it affects people around.
Right.
You probably had this very thing happen. Go to somewhere and they say, "Oh, we better put this down the preacher's head."
Yeah. Right. Oh yeah. All the time. Right.
It does.
Right.
And so what happens when people say that, what they're admitting is
right.
Our lifestyle pricks their conscience.
Right.
And that's salt.
Right.
So
because salt also irritates.
That's right.
When you have an open wound and you get salt in it, it's going to hurt.
Yeah.
right? It's going to sting. Yeah. So yeah, and so there's that aspect too of when people are confronted by righteousness and holiness. I mean, it's going to sting some. Yeah, because I've had people all the time. Yeah, well, don't say that in front of the preacher. Well, you shouldn't say that anyway, right? I mean, come on. And people try to live, these compartmentalized lives. This is my life, at church. This is my life when I'm at home. This is my life when I'm with my friends. And we think that we can just kind of keep them nice and neat and they can all look different. But what's the problem with that? I mean, obviously, Christ is all, right? He is our life. And so, I mean, you can't just say, well, this is my life here and this is my life there. But
so I think that helps preserve.
Yeah, right.
Just by your Christian presence.
Right.
Yeah. If you're living the right kind of life.
So it's kind of a follow-up question to that and kind of piggyback on that. What does it look like to bring the flavor of Christ to our workplace, our family, or our community? Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. The what? Yeah. Yeah.
And both of them are correct. Michelle said it's very different according to the reception.
Right.
So the rejection of God's love can be portrayed as accepting, controlling, like Michelle said, or it can be shared judgment.
Right. It can be, yeah.
Because it's just as loving to tell
Right.
people, look, there's a judgment coming.
Right.
As it is to say God loves you, accept His Son Jesus, and live a good life. So it can be very different. It can be.
Yeah.
If sharing the gospel and living the life that we should live was a good thing everywhere we went, people wouldn't hate us.
Yeah. Right.
So I guess as Christians we have to be willing to accept
Right.
whatever consequence, whether it's a good consequence or a bad consequence, of us being who we're supposed to be or sharing.
Mm-hmm. And so what's the kind of the common theme here? Yeah, well, love, but also like for example, in circumstances where you're around like your family or your coworkers or your friends, living out your faith, being authentic about your faith and real about your faith. So that they see Christ in you. So that you're not trying to hide that your light. You're not trying to, right. You're not trying to be a certain way around certain people. You're just, you're right. And trying to be Christ and trying to show Christ to them. It becomes easy when we're around people that aren't believers to just kind of withdraw to where they might not even know that you're a believer. You see what I'm saying? That's where I was kind of going with that. Like, they need to know that you're a believer. How do we show that we're believers? Well, we do it through love. We do it through sometimes risking being offensive, right? But remember what because the gospel is a stumbling block. It is offensive. What? Right. Well, but let it be the gospel that's offensive, and that's what we're going to kind of talk about tonight. Let it be the gospel that's offensive and not us. So you know what I'm saying by that? We can't be jerks. We have to be salt in the good sense, as being flavor, and preserving rather than repelling people through our actions. What are some areas that we could lose our saltiness as Christians, and how can we guard against that?
I think your example earlier was one of you're trying to live
Yeah.
lives instead of.
Right, because it might not even be a necessary quote-unquote bad thing you're doing. You just might not be doing anything. Right, so you see what I'm saying? Because immediately you ask I ask that question, and your mind goes to like, okay, well, I could do this, that's bad, this is bad, this is bad, this is bad. It might just be just being indifferent.
Yeah, I think one of the things you can lose your saltiness in is what Paul said, we're ambassadors for Christ.
Right.
And you can forget who you're representing and begin to represent
Yeah.
yourself.
Right.
And when you do that, then you're not drawing them to Christ, you're not making them thirsty for Christ, you're not preserving
Right.
the Christian doctrine.
Right.
It becomes a fleshly thing.
Right. I always forget, is that 1st or 2nd Corinthians? I always get it mixed up. I know it's chapter 5, verse 17. But because I love that, because it said, like, we are ambassadors for Christ. What is an ambassador, first of all? Somebody who represents an authority, right? So, like, we send people as ambassadors to other countries. Are they their own authority? No, they represent the authority of the country that sends them, right? So when he calls us ambassadors, we are ambassadors for Christ. We're not going out on our own authority, we're going out on his. I mean, that goes back to the Great Commission that we talked about the very first week. All authority has been given to me. And so go, therefore, and make disciples of all the nations. So we're ambassadors for Christ. We are his ambassadors. And our message is what? Be reconciled to God. And that's what I say all the time, because our message to the world is not clean yourself up and then come to Christ. Become like me, think like me, vote like me. Our message is be reconciled to Christ, right? And then, and he'll clean us up, right? He does his transforming work in us. Sorry, were you going to say something, Jim?
No, sir.
Oh, okay. So let's see. And then he also talks about being the light of the world. You are the light of the world. A city situated on a hill cannot be hidden. No one lights a lamp and puts it under a basket, but rather on a lampstand, and it gives light for all who are in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. So, first of all, what is the source of the light? He says we're the light of the world. Now, does that mean that we are actually the light? No. What's the light? The light is the light of Christ, right? We reflect the light of Christ. We are not the light source. We are the light bearers. And because Jesus declared to be the light of the world. We see that in John 8:12. He said, I am the light of the world. But he extends that quality or that identity to us as his followers, which indicates that we as his believers reflect his light, just like the moon reflects the light of the sun. Our light is not from ourselves, but from Jesus. And so, just like the ambassador example, we're not the authority, but we go out on his authority. We're not the light, but we shine the light of Jesus. And he says he calls it a city on a hill. Jesus describes believers as a city on a hill which cannot be hidden. A city on a hill is visible for miles and serves as a landmark. When you put it up on the hill, you can see it from a far distance, and you can, as opposed to if it was on the ground level, it elevates it. You can see it. So our lives should stand out and draw attention, but not to ourselves, to God, right? So he says, let your light shine through good works. Jesus emphasizes that our good works should shine in a way that causes others to glorify God. The good works aren't the source of our salvation or the what actually saves us. It's the result of our salvation, right? We've talked about all along, right? Where it's totally not works based, but we should. But when we are saved, we work, and our good works shine in such a way to reflect God's character, and He's reflected in us. He says, so that others may see your good deeds, but not for for your own sake, so that they would be drawn to Christ. Let's see. Let me I'm trying to think of a better way to ask this. First of all, how can we balance humility with the call to let our light shine? publicly. Because we're called to let our light shine, right? But the implication is not that we shouldn't do it for ourselves, right? How do we balance that humility with letting our light shine publicly? Yeah.
She just told me that she saw something different in me. She never met anyone like me. And she just told me that she thought I was a really good person. I told her that I'm not a really good person. That I
Right.
was saying that I was born a sinner. You know, kind of went into this like, I'm not a really good person.
Right.
Like, I'm just a saved person. And so
Right.
I think that when we're honest about our condition, where we were,
Yeah.
and who has saved us, and by what, by nothing he saved us, I think that kind of helps. And we're not doing it, like, I wasn't saying that so that she would think I had a biblical answer. I was doing that because I wanted her to know the gospel too.
Yeah. Well, and
That's not
yeah.
always the way. I'm not saying,
Right.
I'm just using a recent example.
Right.
I'm not saying that I'm someone who has never done anything for myself as far as ministry is concerned. I think that when we step back, we're honest about who we were and what God has done in us.
Right.
That helps.
And realizing that it was not anything that we did. You know, our salvation is nothing that we earned. It's nothing that we did. It's nothing that we, were able to just kind of, work our way up the ladder, so to speak. It's a gift from God. And so remembering that, it puts it in the proper perspective.
Well, I heard one preacher, and I don't know if y'all will agree or disagree with this. I'm still battling with it somewhat myself, but he said he does a bait and switch. He tries to draw people to himself by being interesting and flavorful, but then as soon as people are drawn to him, he says, "It's not me."
But let me tell you about.
And so he does a bait and switch. I see some flaws in that.
Sure,
I
yeah.
also see if you can draw people and get them interested in what you're saying.
He's being salt.
Right.
I mean, and my next question was actually, have you ever experienced a time when your actions or character sparked curiosity or questions about your faith? That kind of bridges what you're saying with what Mary Jo was saying. You didn't go out intending to share the gospel, but she saw something in you and started asking you questions because of the life that you were living, right? And so, yeah, there's a certain point. Sometimes people should see Christ reflected in you. And that should be something that is at least sparks curiosity in somebody.
He's not drawing from yourself, but like,
Not that you were trying to draw her to yourself, right?
when you follow Christ, you're going to be different.
Right,
People are going to see a difference in you, whether you think you're different, because
right,
they're seeing Christ.
Right.
Like you're saying.
Yep.
Like I'm saying. What they're seeing is not you. They're seeing
Right.
Christ.
right,
Well, this particular preacher I was talking about was more of an apologist, and so
Yeah.
he tried to answer questions and do different things and kind of keep Christianity in the background.
Right.
And get people interested in what he was saying. And then once he had them interested, then he would start talking about Christianity.
right.
In particular. But
I mean, hey, it's his method. I mean,
Well, I try to relate to the youth. It's kind of the same thing.
Right.
Relate to the youth and get them listening to what I'm saying, and then I will teach them. It's kind of similar.
yeah, right, yeah. Well, so, and why do you think,
Like setting your light so that everyone can see it isn't like boasting in your good work.
Right.
Like the opposite would be not doing good deeds.
Right,
You know,
right.
Like that's what's hiding your light.
Right.
Is by not living for God. So it's not a question
Right.
of like.
well, and and in that example, so like in this example, like the letting your light shine and not putting it under a basket. So I've read that this is actually in the ancient times, when they wanted, candles were hard. I mean, they're not, we didn't have like lighters, to like light a candle. So once they lit a candle, I mean, it's hard to light again. So there were some times where they wanted to keep the candle burning, but they didn't want the light, but they wanted the candle to keep burning. So in other words, what he's saying here is he's not talking about extinguishing the candle, right? That we lose the light of Christ, that we lose our salvation. But what he's talking about is us trying to keep our salvation, but keeping it hidden. Not letting that light shine. So the light is still shining, you're just trying to keep it hidden. so which kind of goes, that's what you said kind of made me think about that. Why do you think Jesus links good works with others glorifying God? And how can good works serve as a bridge to sharing the gospel?
Well, if you're living for God, like the good works being what God has told you to, not
Right.
what the world says. And if you're living countercultural, like you're living against the culture.
Right. I mean, he says, so he says, in the same way, let your light shine before others so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. So it's not that the glory is not going to you, the glory is going to God, but it's based on your good works, because the good works is what people see. Right. Yeah, right. Or why do you not do this? How do you have such confidence when you're going through something like you're going through? Yeah, I mean, Michelle, you're going to have an amazing testimony when people look and say, how are you going through what you're going through? You have the opportunity to say, well, let me tell you about how I'm getting through this. And you have the awesome opportunity then to share the gospel right there and to talk about the glory of God. And you've already experienced that. Right. Right.
I think that was just part of a preparation, actually.
Yeah. Well, let's go on to 1 Peter chapter 2. We were here this morning. But living honorably among non-believers. So he says, dear friends, I urge you, this is chapter 2, verses 11 and 12. Dear friends, I urge you as strangers and exiles to abstain from sinful desires that wage war against the soul. Conduct yourselves honorably among the Gentiles, so that when they slander you as evildoers, they will observe your good works and will glorify God on the day he visits. All right, now, who was 1 Peter written to? Okay, yeah, Christians, right, yeah. Specifically, though, yeah, Jewish Christians who were scattered, who were exiled, right? And they were living among foreign lands, so to speak. And so what he's urging them is saying, as you're living among the Gentiles, you're not in your homeland, you're not, you're living in these foreign areas. As you're living, conduct yourselves honorably, so that even when they slander you as evildoers, they will observe your good works and glorify God on the day he visits. So first of all, let's just kind of walk through this. Strangers and exiles. He says that believers are strangers and exiles. And I think he's talking to Jewish Christians here, but the application for us is that we are strangers and exiles in the world, meaning that our ultimate citizenship is in heaven, which shapes our actions and our choices because we're living not for earthly approval, but for God's eternal kingdom. And then he says, abstain from sinful desires. So he calls us to abstain from sinful desires that wage war against the soul. This is a battle that every believer faces. Sinful desires pull us toward self-centered living, living for ourselves, but the Spirit empowers us to live in a way that reflects God's holiness. And holiness attracts people who are seeking the truth and purity in a broken world. And he says, conducting ourselves honorably. Living honorably is about integrity and grace, even when we're misunderstood or misrepresented. And so this honorable conduct provides a testimony to non-believers who may eventually recognize God's work in our lives and glorify Him. So what does it mean to live as a stranger in today's society? And how does this affect our actions?
You know, when you travel, if you've ever been out of the country and you're in a different culture, even one that's very similar to yours,
Yeah.
you can, and we see it all the time here in Thomasville. Michelle and I will go out, we'll go to a restaurant, we'll say Yankee.
Yeah.
How are we able to do that? Because when you're a stranger in another culture,
You stick out.
you stick out.
Right.
Even when you're trying to fit in,
Right.
you don't know the rules and the regulations, or
Right.
follow the rules and regulations of that culture the way that an insider does. And so to be a stranger here in this world means we don't follow the customs of the world the way that it comes natural to people that are
Yeah.
of the world.
Right.
And so we stick out.
Yeah.
You can say
Right.
Christian,
Right.
if you're actually living out your Christian faith.
Because this might not be the best way to ask it, but what's the opposite of this? Living as strangers and exiles here, knowing that our ultimate citizenship is in heaven. What's the opposite to that? Living in basically making your home in the world.
A CIA Christian.
Yeah, yeah, right, yeah. Yeah, you're undercover, right? But not in a good way. We're comfortable. We become citizens of the country that we're living in, and then we become comfortable with it, and we start adopting that culture and desires. Which, yeah, exactly, and that's where I was going with that. We see this all throughout the Old Testament. I mean, even back to the early days of Israel. I mean, they were supposed to go in and conquer all the land, take no prisoners. What did they do? They would go in, they would take prisoners, they would not eradicate everything like they were supposed to, and they would end up syncretism, basically. Just they're synchronizing with all the customs and cultures of those lands, and then it starts to take them away from the Lord, and so we're called to not do that, right? We're exiles here. We're strangers here. We're sojourners here. Does that mean we can't love our country? No, absolutely not. We should love our country. But our ultimate allegiance is to God, knowing that eventually, He's going to set up His kingdom, and we belong in that kingdom rather than the kingdoms of the world. So why is it important to abstain from these sinful desires, especially when other people are watching? Yeah. If we say we belong to the heavenly kingdom, then our lives should reflect it, right? Because
I have met Christians.
yeah,
I have met Christians that I thought to myself, had I not been a Christian when I met them, I would have not wanted to be one.
yeah. Well, and I made the comment maybe a couple weeks ago that I actually read recently. Somebody said, and this was like a Facebook comment. I mean, it wasn't like a quote from like a interview or something. It was just somebody commented on somebody's status saying, basically, if heaven is filled with people like most of the Christians I know, why would I want to be there? That's a sobering thought. That means that there are many Christians whose lives are not reflecting the goodness and the glory of God.
Thank goodness it won't be filled with Christians.
Yeah.
We act like that we know because once we're fully redeemed,
Yeah. Right. Yep. Praise God. Right. So think about this to yourselves. This is just a rhetorical question. Think about any areas that you feel tempted to compromise or fit in with the world, and then pray for God's strength to resist that temptation and to live honorably, even if it makes you stand out. This was especially hard when we lived in New York. We planted a church up in New York, and we were surrounded by people of all different faiths, all different backgrounds. And in the area that we lived in, it was actually majority Muslim, Muslim people from different Arab countries. And there's temptation to try to kind of blend in so that we're not seen as freaks. But at the same time, knowing that our ultimate goal was, to see people saved and to preach the gospel, and the gospel is going to offend, and we should stand out as Christians. We should, and that shouldn't scare us. We shouldn't. I know none of us want to stand out, but that's what we're going to do. We're going to stand out if we're truly living the life that God's called us to live. So, living a life that attracts others to Christ involves being the salt of the earth and the light of the world, which preserves the truth and bringing the flavor and the light of Christ to those around us. And it means conducting ourselves with honor, abstaining from sin, and showing kindness and grace to others. So our lives can either point people to Christ, or our lives can obscure Christ. But our goal is to reflect His love and His light in a way that draws others to Him. And so, just as we're learning about evangelism, we've got to, we need to know the right words, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in detail over the next few weeks. But our lives have to reflect the words that we're sharing, because you wouldn't want to share the gospel with somebody and them say, well, if Christianity has anything to do with the way that you're living, then why would I want anything to do with that? You don't want somebody to have to say that, or you don't want somebody to think that. So we have to live our lives in a way that honors God and glorifies God. But that's not, it can't stop there. And I think that's the problem with that quote that we talked about in the beginning. Preach the gospel always, and if necessary, use words. Well, we should preach the gospel with our lives, but we can't stop there. It's incomplete. We have to use we have to use words, but at the same time, you can't just focus on the words and not live the life. And that's my point for tonight. So, let me ask this. Let's just, as in closing, we'll actually end up a little early today. So, did anybody a couple weeks ago? I challenged everybody to write down 3 names and pray for them. Does anybody have anything to share about how that's gone, or anything that God has either revealed to you or done as a result of that? Oh, okay. Yeah. So you're not. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Right. May involve somebody else. Right. 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 So you look like you're dying to say something. Yeah. Okay. No problem. So let me encourage you then, just to continue to pray for those people. Continue to try every day to pray for them by name, and over the course of the next few weeks, let's just see what God does with that. But I encourage you, pray bold prayers. Pray bold prayers of asking God to allow you the opportunity to share your faith. Asking God to work in their hearts, to be receptive to the gospel. And ultimately, pray that God would reveal Himself to them, and that they would respond in faith. So, we can pray boldly. All right. Well, that's it for tonight. We'll turn it off and.